Welcome to Just for Heart's YouTube live channel, and today we'll be discussing with Dr. Mansi, who will be guiding us on how to use digital blood pressure monitors at home. Over to you, Dr. Mansi.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Mansi Patil from Pune, India. I am the director for the Hypertension core group here with the Indian Association of Parenteral and Enteral Nutrition and a committee member with the International Society of Hypertension, wherein we are looking at research in hypertension. So like Divya said, we would be talking about home measurement of blood pressure today. As all of you know, hypertension is still one of the leading causes of death and disabilities around the world. Now, the dilemma is that it goes undiagnosed, it goes unnoticed. We don't even realize that we have high blood pressure. And therein comes the concept of home measurement of blood pressure. Now, when we talk about home measurement of blood pressure, the advantages of this are that absolutely anyone can do it. It does not need very extensive training. It does not need a very complicated procedure. It's very easy to understand and follow. You can do it on yourself as well and for everyone else in the family. The motive is that at least one person in each family should be trained to measure blood pressure in the right way. If you see, you have n number of BP instruments floating around. The most common probably that you see is with a doctor, which is the mercury sphygmomanometer. Now that would require more trainings for you to start using. There's an aneroid sphygmomanometer, and then there is the digital one. So if you look at the digital one, this is what we are today going to be focusing on. Before we start talking about how to use it, it is very important to understand that selecting the correct machine is very, very important. So there is something called as validating a machine. Now, all over the world, we have already tested quite a few BP instruments, and we have come to a conclusion that there are a certain set of instruments, blood pressure machines, which give the readings very accurately. And these are called as validated digital blood pressure machines. There are machines which are specifically for home use as well. This list can be accessed on www.stridebp.org. Now, if you look at a blood pressure machine, if you have it with you right now, I'll just show you what I have. This is what a blood pressure machine would look like. And if you look at the back, if you flip it over and you look at the back, this is where the model number of your blood pressure machine is generally mentioned. And this is what you need to start seeing when you say that you are looking at a validated machine. So you match it with the list that has been given to you. Okay, so yeah. Now coming to the parts of blood pressure instrument, obviously this is the machine that you have. This is what the bladder of the cuff of a blood pressure instrument looks like. So this is what it is, and this is the cuff tube. We need to be very careful about what the cuff length or the bladder length within this is. So this part is the bladder length that you're looking at, and this is the bladder width that you look at. Now, why is this important? Because for different people with different arm circumferences, you will find that you will need to use a different instrument for them, a different cuff for them. The instrument can be the same, but the cuff would need to vary. So if you have a small adult or a child, you get a pediatric cuff, wherein I've given the bladder dimensions. Usually it's called a small adult cuff or a pediatric cuff. Then the most commonly used is the adult cuff. So when you buy a blood pressure instrument for yourself, you will find that the cuff that comes with it is the adult cuff that's coming in. Or if you have a large adult or someone who's got a very huge arm circumference, someone who's towards obese, in those cases, you will have to go in for a large or an extra large blood pressure cuff. Usually the circumference is measured at the midpoint of the shoulder and the elbow. So between the shoulder and the elbow, the midpoint is what you're looking at. The blood pressure cuff should always be placed on a bare skin. I understand that there would be times when this is not always possible. Right now, during this YouTube live session, we don't have enough time to discuss those confounding factors. But yes, as far as possible, place the blood pressure cuff on the bare skin. Shirt sleeves, if you're looking at a person who's wearing sleeves and you ask this person to fold the sleeves up, that is usually not suggested because that will have a tourniquet effect. That means it will compress the blood vessels higher up on the arm. So ideally, don't roll them up, place the blood pressure cuff on the bare skin. Now coming to the body position, it is very important to first look at the environment that you are going to measure the blood pressure in. First and foremost, it should be a very quiet room with comfortable temperature. Ideally, we say somewhere around 24 to 26 degrees Celsius is the best temperature for you to start relaxing and measure the blood pressure. You should not be smoking, consuming alcohol, or exercising 30 minutes or half an hour before you measure the blood pressure. So there should be a 30-minute gap between any of these activities and the time when you measure the blood pressure. The bladder should be empty. Don't hold urine before you want to get your blood pressure checked. Next, you should relax, complete relaxation for 3 to 5 minutes before you actually measure the blood pressure. Try and take at least 3 blood pressure readings. 2 is fair enough, is acceptable, but 3 is what is considered the best. Keep a gap of at least 1 minute between 2 blood pressure readings. Now, I'll just show you how the blood pressure cuff is placed. So if you have this blood pressure cuff with you, let's just say we'll put it through here. Now, the point where the tube comes out should be the lower end. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'll just weave it through again. So this, slide it up your arm, the bare arm without a covering here, without clothes here. So I'll probably have to get up. Let's see if we can do this. Yeah, so slide it up here and tighten it from the other end. And when you do that, remember that this tube should be on your elbow joint, this part of your arm. There should be 2 finger gap between the elbow and the lower end of the cuff and at least 2 fingers that go in. So this is how you'll end up wearing the cuff. The cuff should not be very tight. It should not be very loose. And that is what we say is the 2 finger rule. So you have 2 fingers from, the cuff is 2 fingers above the cubital fossa and 2 fingers can go into the cuff before you start inflating it. And what's wrong with this? Yeah. So now coming to the position again, apart from the environment, now your position becomes very important. So it's very important that your back is supported completely. Your feet should be flat on the floor. You should not talk between or during the measurements. And that is true if you're taking it for someone else as well. So while you take it, don't talk, don't try and converse with that person. The cuff that you choose should be the correct size and it should be on the bare skin. Now, a very common mistake that's done is people try and keep this machine at heart level. Now, the point is the cuff that is placed should be at heart level and not really the machine that you're looking at. So the mid-arm, what we calculated or we found out, so the mid-arm should be at the heart level. And of course, the instrument that you use or the machine that you use should be a validated machine. Otherwise, the chances of you getting inaccurate measurements become very high. Now, the other possible point of error is that if this machine that you're using does not have a well-charged battery in it, and that is also when the erroneous measurements come into play. So try and use either a direct DC supply or a direct electric supply for your machine, or you use well-charged batteries for it. Now, reading the readings is very important. How do you actually decipher what has been displayed on your blood pressure machine? So once you put the cuff on, you connect it to the machine, you press the start or the stop button. So when you press start, this bladder or this cuff starts inflating. It starts getting air inside it. It will tighten your arm, and that's absolutely normal and acceptable. That is what is supposed to happen. Thereafter, after some time, it starts deflating and it will stop at a particular time. And this is what your blood pressure readings are going to be. So let's say it shows it as 180, 70, and 70. So the topmost figure that comes in is called as the systolic blood pressure, or the SBP, which is the higher end of the blood pressure. The second reading is your diastolic blood pressure, or the DBP. And finally, the third one is the pulse rate that you're looking at. Now, there would be some machines which would talk about memory. They could talk about resetting the whole thing. They could talk about uploading what your these measurements are. Now, that varies with each machine. But these three basic parameters would always be there in your blood pressure machine. And these are the readings which you need to keep a record of. How many readings do you really need to take? So ideally, there should be 3 readings, but not less than 2. So 2 to 3 readings is considered ideal. The readings should be taken 1 minute apart. So you take one reading, give a 1 minute gap, take another reading, 1 minute gap, and the third reading. The timing of the readings is, the first reading should be in the morning before you take your antihypertensive medications, if you are on them. And the second would be in the evenings before you are going to bed. So there are going to be at least 4 readings per day. Now, if you're looking at diagnosing hypertension, if you're looking at monitoring them, you're not on medication, or you're on medication and you want to see if your blood pressure is under control or not, then ideally the preferred period of monitoring is going to be 7 days, which means 7 days of 4 readings per day, which is 28 readings a day. A minimum of 3 days should be there. Anything less than 3 days is actually very inconclusive. Apart from that, the most ideal method would be to have it on consecutive days. That is, every day you take it. Non-consecutive days provides a valid data, but yet consecutive is going to be way better than non-consecutive days. And there would be certain doctors, there are certain practitioners who will ask you to exclude the first day of the reading, which means if you're going in for 7-day reading, you'll have to go in for 8 days reading, because the first day is going to be excluded. Generally, we say the first day, probably the anxieties, the methodology could be a little awry, and therefore you want to take the best readings, which are going to be the next 7 days or the next 3 days. So it will be either 4 days or 8 days of readings that you really need to take. Now, where do we really go wrong? And that's where the, let's say, like I say, the rainbow of error comes in. So if you're lying down and you're not seated, so seated blood pressure measurement, like I said, with the back supported, feet flat on the ground, legs not crossed, sitting straight, this is what is going to get you the best readings. Usually when you're lying down, the mid-arm or the cuff that is there on your arm will be lower than the heart level. And thus your blood pressure readings would be slightly higher than what they really are. Second is if you have crossed your legs. If you cross your legs and sit, again, because of n number of reasons, you will see that the blood pressure readings are higher. Similarly, it happens when your back is not supported and you yourself are completely supporting the back. Again, the thumb rule, the upper arm is below the heart level. That obviously, like we've already discussed, is going to lead to a higher blood pressure reading. Same goes with if your bladder is full, you're holding urine, you're going to have your blood pressure higher. If you have clothing over the arm, the blood pressure would be higher. Like I said, we probably don't have time to discuss how do you calculate if you have no choice but to measure the blood pressure with the cuff where the person has clothing on the arm. We probably can discuss it later. If the cuff is smaller or greater in size, it is going to give you wrong readings again. So there are times when you see that there's a person who's obese, or the arm circumference is great. If you have someone who's very muscular, you wrap around the cuff and you see it's short, it's small, and you try and hold it with your hand. That's going to again give you a wrong reading. And if you're talking to the person who's being measured, or if you're talking to someone while you're measuring yourself, it is again going to give you a very wrong reading. Usually, these readings are higher than what you actually would have had if you've been relaxed and not talking. And something that I've not mentioned here in this slide is, again, if you have not relaxed, if you're not in a quiet environment, if there's something very noisy, but it's very noisy, it's very distracting, again, the blood pressure readings, them being higher, becomes much more common. Now, when we've got the readings with us, we've got the right methodology, we've used the right machine, we've got the right environment around us, everything said and done. Now, looking at the blood pressure readings, are they going to be the same as what an office blood pressure reading is going to be? Let's say you go to a doctor's clinic and he says it's 140/90, we accept it as normal. But that does not happen when you're talking about HBPM, which is home measurement of blood pressure. Here we say that a reading of 135/85 is the higher cutoff for you. So anything beyond that is going to probably put you at risk. Home blood pressure measurements usually are very good indicators, and it's been established with research as well that HPPM helps you in diagnosing masked hypertension, white collar hypertension. So there are people who would not really show high blood pressure readings in a clinic, or they will show very high readings in the clinic. So all of these factors, they're taken care of with HBPM. It has been shown that it is almost as good as ambulatory 24 hours blood pressure measurement, that is ABPM, the 24-hour average that we take. So, but the point is, HBPM has not been used adequately. We have not used the correct methodology. We have not used the correct machines. We are not trained very well to measure the blood pressure for at home on our own. The other point is, before we sign off, that whenever you have you're measuring your blood pressure, make it a point to write it down. Don't rely only on your memory. So there should be a log that is created. You have a lot of mobile apps, Android and iPhone both. You have a lot of apps that are there which would help you in keeping this record. So you can put in the time, you can put in the readings, number of readings that you have taken, and that is what ideally you should take it to a doctor. What we usually suggest is, when you go to a doctor for your regular checkup, you should have at least 7 or 3 day record with you for the blood pressures that you've measured. So at least 28 measurements, like we discussed earlier, should be there. And so before we close the session, we need to remember that for getting the correct blood pressure measurements at home, it is important, correct machine. It is important to have the right environment around you and the right procedure as well. Putting the cuff on the arm, what position should the cuff be, how tight or loose it should be, how How many times do you measure? How long do you give a gap? So all of this comes into play when you are talking about HBPM. Now let's probably take up a small challenge. There's this Google form that we have created for HBPM. Let's see how many of you measure your blood pressure and get back to us on this. And we would like to see maximum participation from all of you for measuring your blood pressure at home. Trust me, high blood pressure is so very common. You will find that as statistics say, 1 in every 3 person would have hypertension, and 50% of the people who have hypertension do not even know that they have it. There is, again, like we say, there is no age. Hypertension is not very preferable to any age. It will affect absolutely anyone and everyone, both genders, all socioeconomic strata, even children today, you will find are hypertensive, and we need to regularly measure the blood pressures for each and every individual. You all can get in touch with me at my email ID, which I have shared with you. And when you measure your blood pressure, it's what we are calling it is check it yourself campaign. That is you are checking your blood pressure yourself for your health. Thank you. Any questions that all of you have, you could put it in the comments box here, and we can take them one by one in this session itself.
Thank you, Dr. Mansi. It was indeed a very helpful session. We have 2-3 questions from the viewers who are watching us live. I would just like to read them out for you so that you can answer those.
Okay. So the first question, I think yeah, I'm sorry, you were saying something?
No, please, you can just start with the question answer.
Okay, so the first question that we have here is where to check the blood pressure, right or the left arm? I think that's something, thank you for the question. Probably I've missed that out. Ideally, we say you check it on the left side, but again, deciding which arm, what you really do is you go to a doctor, you get it measured on both arms. You do it for 3 times, and whichever arm gives you a higher reading is the arm that you're supposed to use the blood pressure measurement for. So that's how you decide left or right. But if you have not been able to go to a doctor, so the safest would be using the left arm. And does the left and right hand reading vary? Yes, absolutely it does. It does vary if you have either right or the left arm you're measuring it on. And like I said, what you do is you measure, get yourself measured by the doctor and then decide the arm. Then blood pressure measurements must be taken in lying or sitting position, like we've already discussed. The point is that the mid-arm or the cuff that you have tied it, the tied cuff should be at heart level. When you are sitting on when you're sitting in a position and you have a table in front of you, the arm should be supported, and the blood pressure cuff should be at heart level, and that's what you get when you're sitting. Whereas when you're lying down, the chances that this cuff goes below the heart level is much higher. So I'm not saying that you're not supposed to take it while you're lying down, but what you're supposed to do is you are supposed to ensure that it's at the heart level. Think what else? Anyone else?
I think, Dr. Mansi, there are a few more questions are coming up, but due to time constraint, we can take one more question only, which I would just read out for you so that you can answer. Should the cuff be removed, deflatted, and replaced between 2 consecutive readings?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you clearly. Could you repeat that?
Sure, I will. Am I audible now?
Yeah, this is better.
So they're asking, should the cuff be removed, deflatted, and replaced in between 2 consecutive readings?
Yes. So when you do the measurement, especially if you're using a digital machine, you've got the first reading, you press stop there. So the whole cuff deflates, you remove the cuff, and after 1 minute, you place the cuff again and again re-inflate it. So that's how it's supposed to be done, right? You would be needing to remove it, deflate, and then inflate, put it back again and inflate. You don't leave the cuff on the arm for that 1 minute gap that's there.
Okay, perfect. I think that was a great, complete answer. I would request our viewers to ask their questions on this YouTube link where they are watching us right now, so that we will again try to answer back their comments and whatever questions they still have in their mind. Because due to time constraint, we can not take more questions. We still have a few more questions to answer, but yes, we will answer them live. So
It'll
thank
be
you
a
so
pleasure
much,
to answer
viewers.
them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mansi. And I request each one of you to subscribe and press bell icon so that you will get updates on our upcoming live sessions. Thank you so much. See you all.
Thank you.